Come. Sit beside the fire. Pull your deal close around your shoulders, for the wind is restless tonight, and the stars are many. I am old now. My bones remember more winters than I care to count. But my mind remembers everything. And tonight, if you will listen, I will tell you a story that the wind itself has not forgotten. This is the story of a boy. A boy born with nothing. A boy who lost everything. A boy who became the most powerful man the world has ever known. His empire would stretch from the Pacific Ocean to the gates of Europe. His armies would reshape the map of the world. His bloodline would flow through the veins of millions. But we do not begin with power. No. Power is a thing that must be built, and before it is built, it must be imagined, and before it is imagined, there must be a reason. A wound. A hunger. A fire lit in the dark. We begin with the grass. We begin with the sky. We begin with a mother's cry and a father's prayer and a fist so small it could barely hold a stone. We begin at the beginning. In the year that the Western calendar would call 1162, though we did not count our years that way, a child was born on the banks of the Omen River, in the shadow of a sacred mountain called Burkhan Khaldun. The Omen is a quiet river. Not wide. Not fierce. It moves through the land the way an old man walks, slowly, patiently, knowing there is nowhere it needs to be in a hurry. The water is clear and cold, fed by snowmelt from the Kentii Mountains, and in the spring, the banks bloom with wildflowers so thick you can smell them before you see them. Deer come down to drink at dawn. Eagles circle above, riding the warm air that rises from the valley floor. It was here, in this quiet, beautiful, unforgiving place, that a child came screaming into the world. The mountain watched. Even then, even before anyone knew what this child would become, the mountain watched. The rivers listened. The sky, that great eternal blue sky that we call Tungri, looked down upon the earth and took notice. His mother's name was Holan. Holan was a strong woman. Stronger than most men I have known, and I have known many. She came from the Alkanad tribe, and she had been married to a man of the Merkit people. But one day, while she was traveling with her husband across the open steppe, a young chieftain saw her. He saw her face. He saw the way she sat in the cart, straight-backed and proud. And he decided that she would be his wife. His name was Yesagay. He was the leader of a small clan called the Kiad, part of the larger Borjigin tribe. He was not a patient man. He rode back to his camp, gathered his brothers, and they chased down Holan's husband, who fled on a fast horse, leaving his wife behind. That was the way of things in those days. Women were taken. Alliances were made and broken by the strength of a man's arm and the speed of his horse. It was brutal. It was common. And Holan, though she wept so hard that the histories say her cries echoed off the hills, eventually accepted her fate, as the steppe demanded. She would prove to be the most important person in this story. Not the boy. Not the conqueror. The mother. Remember that. Yesagay was a chieftain, but not a great one. Not a Khan. Not a ruler of nations. He had perhaps a few hundred followers. Enough to survive. Enough to raid when times were lean. Enough to defend against smaller enemies, though not enough to challenge the larger tribes that roamed the great grass sea. The Tatars to the east were stronger. The Merkits to the north were stronger. The Naimans to the west were stronger. Yesagay lived in the spaces between these powers, doing what smaller men have always done. He survived. On the day of his son's birth, Yesigey had been away fighting. He had ridden east to raid the Tatars, a rival people with whom the Borjigin had feuded for generations. Blood had been spilled between these two peoples so many times that no one could remember who struck first. It did not matter. The hatred was old and deep and passed down from father to son like an heirloom. On that particular raid, Yesigey had captured a Tatar warrior of some importance. A man whose name was Temüjin Huge. When Yesigey returned to his camp and found his wife holding a newborn son, red-faced and screaming and very much alive, he held the boy up and gave him a name. He named him after his captured enemy. He named him Temüjin. It was a name of conquest. A name that said, "I have won today. Remember it." And the world would remember. Oh, how the world would remember. But there was something else. Something the old women whispered about when they thought no one was listening. When the child was born, he came into the world clutching something in his tiny right fist. His fingers were curled so tightly that Holen had to pry them open, one by one, gently, the way you would open the petals of a flower that has not yet decided to bloom. And there, in the center of his palm, was a blood clot. Dark and solid, the size of a knucklebone. The old women gasped. They looked at one another with wide eyes. A blood clot in the hand of a newborn. It was an omen. A sign from the eternal blue sky. Some said it meant the boy would be a great warrior. That he would hold the blood of his enemies in his hand and never let it fall. Others said it meant he would bring suffering, that his path would be soaked in red, that everywhere he walked the earth would weep. Still others said it simply meant the boy was strong, that he had gripped life itself before he even opened his eyes. Holen said nothing. She simply took her son to her breast and let him feed. She was practical, Holen. She did not have time for omens. She had a child to keep alive. And keeping children alive on the steppe, in that land of endless wind and sudden winters and wolves that came down from the mountains when the snow was deep, that was never a simple thing. Let me tell you about the steppe now, so that you can understand the world this boy was born into. Close your eyes if you wish. Let the fire warm your face. And imagine a sea of grass. Not a meadow. Not a field. Not a lawn or a garden or a park. A sea. Stretching in every direction, farther than the eye can follow, farther than a horse can run in a day, farther than a bird can fly before it tires and must rest its wings. The Mongolian steppe is one of the largest grasslands on this earth, and in those days, it was home to dozens of tribes, all of them moving, all of them watching the sky for signs of weather, all of them competing for the same things. Pasture. Water. Survival. There were no cities. There were no walls. There were no roads or bridges or temples or marketplaces. The people lived in huts. You may know them as yurts, but we called them shas. Round tents made of felt and wood, warm in winter and cool in summer, and so cleverly designed that a family could raise one in an hour and pack it onto the backs of oxen in half that time. When the grass was eaten down, the people moved. When winter came howling from the north with teeth of ice, they sought shelter in the valleys. When summer baked the lowlands dry, they climbed into the mountains where the stream still ran cold and clear and the grass was green and fresh. Their wealth was measured not in gold or silver, for what good is gold when the nearest market is 1,000 miles away? Their wealth was measured in horses, in sheep, in cattle and goats. A man with 1,000 horses was rich beyond measure. A man with 100 was comfortable. A man with 10 was poor. And a man with no horses was already dead, even if his heart still beat. Because on the steppe, a man without a horse cannot hunt, cannot flee from enemies, cannot follow the grass, cannot survive. The children learned to ride before they could walk with confidence. I know this sounds impossible, but it is true. By the age of 3, a Mongol child sat in the saddle, tied to the horse with strips of leather so they would not fall. The horse would walk slowly, and the child would sway and grip and learn the rhythm of another creature's body. By 5, they rode alone. By 7, they began to learn the bow. By 10, they could shoot an arrow from horseback at full gallop, the wind tearing at their face, the earth blurring beneath them, and hit a target the size of a man's chest from 50 paces. This was not cruelty. This was not ambition. This was survival. The steppe did not forgive weakness. The steppe did not wait for children to grow up. If a boy could not ride and shoot by the time he was 12, he would not live to see 30. That was the simple, terrible truth of the world. And there was beauty in it, too. Do not forget the beauty. The way the grass turned gold in autumn, rippling like water under the wind. The way the sky at night filled with so many stars that you could not find the darkness between them. The sound of horses breathing in the cold morning air, their breath rising in white clouds. The taste of irag, fermented mare's milk, sharp and sour and warming in the belly. The songs the women sang while they worked, songs about rivers and mountains and lovers who rode away and never came home. This was the world that Temüjin was born into. A world of beauty and brutality, woven together so tightly that you could not have one without the other. A world where the strong survived and the weak were swallowed by the grass, forgotten as if they had never existed at all. Rest a moment now. Let the fire settle. There is no hurry. The story will wait for you. The boy's early years were, by the standards of the steppe, ordinary. He grew as boys grew. He learned to ride. He learned to fish in the omen with lines made of horsehair. He learned which birds could be eaten and which were sacred. He learned to read the sky for weather, the grass for season, and the faces of men for danger. He had brothers. Khazar, who was born a year or 2 after him, was the strong one. Even as a small boy, Khazar could draw a bow that made grown men grunt with effort. Kachan was quieter. Temüjin was the youngest, still clinging to his mother's deal when the older boys went out to hunt. And then there were the half-brothers, Begter and Belgute, born of Yesugei's second wife. They lived together. They ate together. They slept in the same ger, under the same felt roof, listening to the same wind. But Temüjin was different. Even then, even when he was small, people noticed it. He was not the biggest. He was not the loudest. He did not boast or wrestle or challenge the other boys the way Khazar did. Instead, he watched. He listened. He sat at the edge of the fire when the men talked, and he studied their faces, and he remembered what they said. And more importantly, he remembered what they did not say. The pauses. The glances. The way a man's hand moved to his belt when he was nervous. The way a smile could hide a blade. There is a kind of intelligence that cannot be taught. It is not the intelligence of scholars who read books by lamplight. It is not the intelligence of priests who memorize prayers. It is the intelligence of survival. The ability to read a situation the way a hunter reads tracks in the snow, quickly, accurately, with your life depending on being right. Temüjin had this. He had it from the very beginning, as if the sky itself had whispered it into his ear while he slept. And he had something else. A temper. Not the loud, explosive kind that flares and fades. A different kind. A deep, slow, burning thing that lived in his chest like a coal buried in ash. When he was wronged, he did not shout. He did not strike. He went quiet. And he remembered. He stored every slight, every insult, every moment of helplessness in a place deep inside himself where it would harden over time into something cold and patient and very, very dangerous. These qualities, the watching, the patience, the cold fire, would one day make him the most feared man alive. But for now, he was just a boy. A boy who played on the riverbanks and chased marmots through the tall grass and fell asleep to the sound of his mother singing softly in the dim orange light of the GER. When Temüjin was perhaps 8 or 9 years old, his father decided it was time to find the boy a wife. This may seem strange to you. A wife for a child who had barely lost his milk teeth. But on the steppe, marriage was not about love. Not at that age. Marriage was alliance. It was a rope woven between two families, binding them together so that when the storms came, neither would be blown away alone. A good marriage could mean the difference between a clan that endured for generations and one that scattered to the winds before the first real test. Yesugei took his son and rode east, away from the Onan River, across several days of open grassland, toward the territory of the Ongirat tribe. The Ongirat were known for something unusual among the steppe peoples. They did not fight as fiercely as the other tribes. Instead, they survived through marriage. They raised daughters of such beauty and such strength that the most powerful clans in Mongolia sought them as brides. The Ongirat traded not in horses or weapons, but in alliances sealed by blood and family. Along the way, father and son stopped to rest at the camp of a man named Sekhen of the Kongirad people. He was a welcoming man, generous with his food and his fire, and he looked at the boy Temüjin with curious eyes. And Sekhen had a daughter. Her name was Bort. She was a year or perhaps 2 older than Temüjin. The histories do not describe her face in detail, because the historians were men, and men in those days did not waste ink on the appearances of women. But they tell us she was strong. They tell us she was bright. They tell us she carried herself with the quiet confidence of a girl who knew exactly who she was and did not need anyone else to tell her. Temüjin looked at her, and something settled inside him. Like a stone dropping into still water. I do not know what a boy of 8 or 9 understands about love. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps everything. But from that moment, the histories are clear. Temüjin wanted no other wife. Not then. Not ever. And in the end, despite everything that would happen, the wars, the conquests, the empires, the other women who would come later as was the custom of powerful men, Bort remained first. Always first. She was his counsel. His anchor. The one person in the world he trusted completely. Sekhen agreed to the match. He saw something in the boy's strange pale eyes, something that made him think this child would become more than the son of a minor chieftain. Temüjin would stay with Bort's family for a time, as was the custom. He would learn their ways. He would grow. And the bond between the families would strengthen like a rope pulled taut. Yesugei embraced his son. He climbed onto his horse. And he began the long ride home. He never made it. On the road back to his own lands, Yesugei came upon a camp of Tatars. He knew them. They knew him. The hatred between the Temüjin and the Tatars was older than any man alive, a blood feud that had claimed lives on both sides for longer than anyone could remember. But on the steppe, there were rules. Even between enemies, there were rules. And the most sacred of all was hospitality. If a traveler came to your fire, you fed him. You gave him drink. You let him rest. To refuse was a grave insult. To poison a guest was among the worst sins imaginable. It violated the laws of the sky itself. The Tatars invited Yesige to eat with them. And Yesige, bound by the codes that governed life on the steppe, accepted. He dismounted. He sat among men who hated him. He ate their food. He drank their irag. And the food was poisoned. He knew it almost immediately. The fire in his belly was the wrong kind of fire, sharp and twisting, like a snake coiling inside him. He stood. He mounted his horse. And he rode as hard as his failing body would allow, pushing west toward his own camp, his own people, his own family. But the poison was already in his blood. It moved through him like ink through water, darkening everything it touched. By the time he reached his camp, he could barely sit upright. His men carried him into his ger. They laid him on felt blankets. They brought him water. They brought healers. But there was nothing to be done. He sent a messenger for Temüjin. "Ride fast," he said. "Bring my son home." But the boy was days away, living with Bort's family, and the messenger rode as hard as he could, and Temüjin rode back as fast as a boy on a borrowed horse could ride, but it was not fast enough. Yesige was dead. And with his death, the world Temüjin had known, small and imperfect as it was, collapsed. Because on the steppe, loyalty was given to the strong. Not to bloodlines. Not to names. Not to the memory of a dead man, no matter how brave he had been. Yesige's followers had followed him because he was Yesige. Because he was alive and strong and could protect them and feed them and lead them to good pasture. His son was a boy. A child of 9 or 10 years. What could a child offer? What protection? What leadership? What future? One by one, the families that had ridden with Yesige packed their jars. They loaded their carts. They gathered their animals. And they left. Men who had eaten at Yesige's fire every night for years turned their backs. Men who had sworn oaths of loyalty, who had called him brother and friend, who had ridden beside him into battle, they looked at Holen and her children and they saw nothing worth staying for. And they disappeared into the grass. The cruelest blow came from the Temüjin, a clan related to the Temüjin by blood. Their leaders had long been jealous of Yesige, and now, with the chieftain dead and his heir a child, they saw their chance. They did not merely leave. They drove Holen's family out. They took the remaining horses. They took the livestock. They took everything that should have been the family's inheritance and rode away without looking back. Holen stood in the empty camp. The felt walls of abandoned chairs flapped in the wind. The fire pits were cold. The corrals were empty. Her children stood around her, 5 boys and a daughter, wide-eyed and silent and afraid. She had nothing. No horses. No followers. No allies. No protection. Just the open steppe, stretching endlessly in every direction, and the winter coming on. A lesser person would have walked to the nearest large camp and begged for shelter. Would have accepted whatever role was offered, servant, second wife, laborer, anything to keep her children fed. Many women did. There was no shame in it, or at least no one spoke of the shame aloud. But Holen was not a lesser person. She gathered her children. She looked each of them in the eye. And she spoke words that have survived nearly 900 years, carried down through generations of Mongol oral history, whispered around fires just like this one. She said, "You have no one but each other. You have no friend but your shadow." And then she went to work. She taught the boys to fish in the Onen River, standing in the cold water with lines made of horsehair and hooks carved from bone. She showed them which roots were safe to eat and which would twist their stomachs into knots. She hunted marmots and ground squirrels and small birds, game that required patience and cunning rather than the horses they no longer had. She dug wild onions from the earth. She picked garlic and berries and the tiny seeds of wild grasses. And she stretched every scrap, every morsel, every mouthful of food to keep 6 children alive through the turning of the seasons. They were outcasts. Scavengers. The lowest of the low. Other tribes rode past and did not stop. Other children threw stones. No one offered help. No one offered alliance. No one offered even a kind word. But they survived. Let me say that again, because it matters more than anything else in this story. They survived. Holen kept her children alive through sheer will, and in doing so, she taught them something that no amount of wealth or power or comfort could ever teach. She taught them that the world owes you nothing. That everything you have must be earned or taken. That the people who abandon you when you are weak will come crawling back when you are strong. And that a family that endures the worst together will never be broken apart. Temüjin learned these lessons in his bones. He learned what it felt like to go to sleep hungry and wake up hungrier. He learned what it meant to be invisible, to be nothing, to be a ghost that the world looked through as if he were not there. And he learned the cold, patient truth that would drive every decision he ever made for the rest of his life. That power is not given. It is taken. And once taken, it must be held with both hands and never, ever let go. He was no longer a boy playing on the river banks. He was something new. Something the steppe had forged in cold and hunger and silence. But inside the family, even as they held together against the world, something dark was growing. A tension between brothers. A fight over food that would end in blood. But that story belongs to the next night. The fire is low now. The embers glow soft and orange beneath the ash, pulsing gently, like a heartbeat. Outside the GER, the wind has finally settled, and the steppe is quiet in the way that only the steppe can be quiet, a silence so deep you can hear the earth breathing. The boy Temüjin sleeps tonight on the bank of the Onen River, curled beneath a thin felt blanket that smells of smoke and horse. He is cold. He is thin. His ribs show beneath his skin. He does not know what he will become. He does not dream of empires or armies or the great blue banner that will one day fly over half the world. He dreams of fish. He dreams of warm milk. He dreams of his father's voice, already fading, like a song heard from very far away. Tomorrow he will wake, and he will find food, and he will keep his brothers alive for one more day. That is all. That is enough. Sleep now. Rest yourself. Let the fire keep you warm. Let the wind carry you somewhere soft and far away. The grass remembers. The wind remembers. The sky remembers everything. And so do I. I will be here when you return. And I will tell you what the boy did next. It will trouble you. You will understand why it had to happen. But not tonight. Tonight is for rest. The steppe is quiet. The horses are still. The river whispers over the stones, the same whisper it has whispered for 1,000 years. And all is well. All is well. All is well.